My name is Imam'S. I was born in Yogyakarta, Indonesia, into a family that was highly respected because of our long line of Islamic scholars. My grandfather was an imam, my father was a teacher of Islamic jurisprudence, and my uncles also held religious positions. Growing up, I was surrounded by Quranic recitations, long hours of study, and endless discussions about Islamic law. Because of this privilege, I had access to certain teachings and books that many girls of my age never even knew existed. But even as a child, questions filled my heart. I often wondered why some things that were taught in Islam felt heavy in my spirit. One of the earliest struggles I had was when I discovered the story of the Prophet Muhammad marrying a 6-year-old girl, Aisha. I could not understand how a child of that age could be a wife. As I grew older and studied more, I began to notice other things that did not seem morally right. For example, I saw contradictions in the teachings. First, men were allowed to marry up to 4 wives, but women could never marry more than one husband even if they were widows. Second, men could easily divorce their wives by just saying talaq 3 times, leaving the woman helpless. Third, there were rules about inheritance that always gave men a bigger share than women, even if the woman worked harder. Fourth, the idea of eternal punishment in Islam always frightened me, while the mercy of God seemed too small and unreachable. These were heavy questions I carried silently, because in my family, no one dared to raise doubts about Islam. This isn't just a testimony, it's a life-changing journey that will challenge everything you thought you knew about faith, truth, and freedom. As you listen, we'd love for you to be part of this moment. Tell us where you're watching from, and share what speaks to your heart. Your words don't just fill the comment section, they can spark hope, ignite faith, and remind someone else that God's love is real and still at work today. Unlike many other girls in my community who married before the age of 20, I was able to continue my education. I finished university at the age of 27. That was when Imam'S, a popular imam in our town, came to seek my hand in marriage. I knew he already had 3 wives, yet because of family pressure and my own search for truth, I agreed. I became his 4th wife. Even as I stepped into that marriage, my mind was not at rest. I was desperate for answers to the questions that had lived in me since childhood. When I married Imam'S, the whole town of Yogyakarta buzzed with the news. People whispered about me in the markets, on the streets, and even in the mosque courtyards. Some said, "Why would a woman with such education choose to marry as the 4th wife?" Others murmured, "She will never be loyal to her husband, she has read too many books." There were also those who believed, "Her knowledge will make her proud, she will not submit like a proper wife should." These voices reached my ears, but I kept silent, hiding the storm inside me. When I arrived at Imam'S compound, I was welcomed by my 3 co-wives. The first wife, Amina, was the oldest and had grown children already. She had a calm face, but her eyes carried stories of many years of endurance. The second wife, Layla, was much younger, in her mid-20s, with a tender spirit. She had small children running about the compound. The third wife, Maryam, was closest to Layla in age, just 23, also raising her little ones. Together, they had lived under the authority of the imam, guided by an old man who often came to teach them Quranic recitations and the duties of a wife. But that day, when I joined them, I noticed a spark in their eyes. They whispered among themselves that perhaps my arrival meant freedom from that old teacher's constant lectures. They hoped I would now take over the teaching since I had been educated. And truly, after just a few days, I began to lead them in reciting Quran and discussing the roles of a wife in Islam. I treated them with simplicity, showing love to their children as though they were mine. This softened their hearts toward me, and soon, whenever one of them had a burden or secret, she felt free to knock on my door and share it with me. It was during the quiet of an afternoon when the compound seemed almost asleep. The imam had gone to the mosque, the children were napping. That was when Layla, the second wife, came into my room with eyes full of worry. She shut the door softly, as if she feared the very walls might overhear her. She sat on the mat close to me, and after a long pause, she whispered, "Sumaya, I cannot sleep at night. My heart is troubled. Our husband is preparing to give my daughter, Safa, in marriage." Her voice shook. Safa was only 10 years old, a playful child who still ran barefoot chasing chickens in the yard. Yet Imam Manzur had promised her to a man of 42, a wealthy trader who already had 2 wives. Layla could not understand it. "How can I send my little girl into such a life?" she asked, tears slipping down her cheeks. "She is still a child. She does not even know how to cook rice properly, yet he wants her to be a wife." I leaned closer to her and took her hand. I had read much about these matters, and though I knew I could not speak openly in the Imam's house, I felt compelled to share my heart. "Layla," I said quietly, "this is not morally right. A 10-year-old is not ready to be a wife." She looked at me, waiting for more, so I told her the reasons I had discovered in my studies. First, a child of that age is not physically prepared for marriage or childbirth. Forcing her into it could destroy her health and even take her life. Second, marriage requires emotional understanding and maturity. A child has no knowledge of how to handle the heavy responsibilities of being a wife and mother. Third, such a union steals away her childhood, robbing her of the chance to learn, to grow, to play, and to discover her own purpose before stepping into adult duties. Layla wept silently as I spoke, clutching my hand as though it was her lifeline. I comforted her, urging her to stay calm for the sake of her daughter, and assured her that somehow God would make a way. What Layla did not know was that I myself was battling storms inside. My heart was torn each time I witnessed practices that oppressed women and children in the name of religion. Yet, in those same moments, I would reach secretly into my trunk where I had hidden a Bible, both Old and New Testament, between my school books. I had brought it with me when I married into the Imam's house. When questions weighed me down, I would open its pages in secret. And there, in the quiet of my room, I would find a peace that no Quranic recitation had ever given me. That Bible became my secret refuge. And though I could not yet speak openly, I knew that the answers I longed for were slowly drawing me toward the one I had read about in those hidden pages. 6 months had passed since I entered the household of Imam Manzur. By then, I had already earned the quiet trust of the 3 wives. Each of them carried silent wounds, though they wore smiles whenever the Imam or the children were near. My room became a place of whispers and tears, but also a place of comfort and hope. Many nights, when the compound was dark and silent, I would sit by the small lamp in my corner, gently opening the Bible hidden among my books. Whenever I read, an unusual calmness filled me. The fear, the questions, and the pain seemed to lift away as I learned about love, mercy, and peace that was deeper than anything I had known in Islam. It was as though someone unseen was guiding me, giving me rest in the middle of the storms. One late evening, as the night insects chirped outside, there was a soft knock on my door. It was Amina, the first wife. She was older than the rest of us, a woman with lines of wisdom and suffering carved into her face. She entered quickly, shut the door behind her, and leaned against it as if guarding herself from the world. Her eyes were full of emotion as she sat beside me. After a long silence, she whispered, "Sumaya, I must tell you something I have never told anyone in this house." My heart raced, but I kept quiet. She took a deep breath and said, "I used to dream of Jesus. Even now, sometimes I still do. The dreams are strange but peaceful. In those dreams I feel loved and safe. But I do not understand them." She lowered her head as if ashamed. Then she continued, "I was not born Muslim. I was born into a Christian family in Semarang. My parents died when I was still young, and I was raised only by my brothers. When I was in school, Imam Manzur approached me. He promised me many things, that he would allow me to keep my faith, that I would be free to practice my religion under his protection, and that he would care for me. My brothers warned me, but I did not listen. His kind gestures and gifts blinded me. Tears filled her eyes. But when I became his wife, everything changed. He took away my Bible, saying that as an imam he must lead by example, and his wives must all follow him in Islam. I was forced to sit under the teachings of the old man who came to guide us before you arrived. My dreams of Jesus never left, but I had no one to talk to. If you haven't subscribed yet, we'd love for you to be part of this journey. Our community is growing, and it's filled with people who, like you, are searching for truth and hope. As you follow along with this powerful testimony of transformation, we invite you to engage with the community. Let us know where you're watching from and share your thoughts on how his journey resonates with you. Your reactions and comments help create a meaningful dialogue around life-changing experiences like these. I reached for her trembling hand and spoke gently, "Amina, you are not alone. I also have a Bible here, both Old and New Testament. I read it in secret, and every time I do, peace fills my soul. Perhaps these dreams of Jesus are not ordinary. They may be his way of showing you his love." For the first time, I saw relief wash over her face. She hugged me tightly, as though she had finally found someone who understood her hidden cries. That night, we sat long in silence, both of us knowing something deeper was happening in our lives than what the imam could ever control. It was a hot afternoon. The imam had gone to the mosque for prayers, and the old teacher who sometimes visited had not come that day. For once, the compound was unusually quiet. The four of us, Amina, Layla, Maryam, and I, gathered together in the small shaded courtyard where we normally studied. But instead of opening our Qurans, that day we began speaking about ourselves. It started softly. Amina, the first wife, broke the silence by saying, "Sometimes, I feel like a bird trapped in a cage. I fly only in my dreams, but when I wake, I find the cage still around me." She looked down, her voice heavy with pain. She had endured the longest, carrying the burden of being the imam's wife for over 20 years. Her grown children loved her, but she confessed that deep inside, her soul was hungry for freedom she could not name. Then Layla, the second wife, spoke. Her voice was thin and shaky. "My heart dies every time I think of Safa. She is still a child, yet they want to make her a wife. I pray every night, asking God to intervene. I sometimes wonder if I am failing as a mother because I cannot protect her." She wept, covering her face with her veil. I placed my hand gently on her back to comfort her, remembering my earlier promise to her. Maryam, the third wife, who was the youngest, surprised us all. She spoke with a trembling boldness. "There are nights I wish the marriage would end," she said. "I feel imprisoned, not only by Islam, but by this very life. I sometimes imagine myself far away, where I can breathe, where I am no longer one among four wives fighting for the same man's attention." Her words shocked us, because she rarely spoke openly. But it was clear she carried deep sorrow. When it was my turn, I did not hide my feelings. "I came here searching for answers," I confessed. "Since childhood, I have questioned many teachings. I cannot reconcile them with what I feel in my heart. And each time I secretly read my Bible, I find peace unlike anything else. I do not yet understand everything, but I know that truth cannot be hidden forever." For the first time, all four of us sat together with our burdens laid bare. The air felt heavy, yet sacred, as though unseen ears were listening to us. We were four women bound in one marriage, yet our souls cried for freedom. We began to whisper of possibilities. What if one day we all left? Not running in one direction, but scattering, each to her own path. We knew it would be risky. We would leave our children behind, which tore at our hearts, but deep down we feared what would become of us if we remained. It was Amina who finally said, "Perhaps God is calling us to something greater than this cage. If he reveals a way, we must be ready." That afternoon changed everything. It was no longer just secret thoughts in our hearts. It became a quiet agreement, a plan that would one day take form. After that afternoon of confessions, Something invisible tied the four of us together. We no longer looked at each other as rivals competing for the Imam's approval. Instead, we began to see each other as sisters sharing a heavy secret. Every whisper between us carried weight. Every glance reminded us that our lives were no longer the same. At first, it was only a dream we spoke about in hushed tones, leaving the compound, leaving the life we had known, and stepping into a future that none of us could fully see. But slowly, the dream began to grow legs. We started by saving little things in secret. Amina kept aside some money that her grown son sometimes sent her for personal needs. Layla tucked away small pieces of jewelry her mother had given her before she died. Miriam, though she had little, managed to save bits of food and dry cloth that could serve in travel. And I kept my Bible and a few of my old school papers hidden, because I knew I could not leave them behind. We never wrote our plan down. Words on paper could betray us. Instead, we spoke in half-sentences, unfinished phrases that only the four of us understood. For example, when the Imam or visitors were around, one of us would say, "We should check the garden soon," and the others would nod, knowing it meant we had to talk privately later. The hardest part of our preparation was thinking of the children. Each of us was a mother except me, and leaving them behind felt like tearing out our hearts. Layla would cry at night, whispering prayers over Safa, hoping God would protect her from the marriage being arranged. Miriam often kissed her children longer than usual when putting them to bed, her eyes clouded with guilt. Amina, though her children were older, still wrestled with the pain of leaving them. But we all came to the same painful conclusion. If we stayed, we might die inwardly and never truly live. Perhaps one day, from a place of safety, we could help them. The moment of escape came one morning. The Imam had left very early for the mosque, as he always did, with his white robe flowing behind him. The air was still dim, the sun only beginning to rise over Yogyakarta. The streets outside were quiet except for a few vendors setting up their stalls. We looked at each other silently, tears already forming in our eyes. None of us spoke loudly, our hearts were speaking enough. Amina held my hand tightly and whispered, "Now or never." Layla kissed her daughter one last time and tucked her back under the blanket. Miriam pressed her forehead against the wall for a moment, as if leaving a final memory there. Then, with small bundles hidden under our veils, we walked out of the compound. Step after step, our tears streamed down, not because of regret, but because of the weight of what we were leaving behind. We did not run, for running would draw attention. Instead, we walked calmly until the gates were behind us. Then, at the first corner, we separated, each heading in a different direction, each with a heart heavy with grief but burning with hope. That morning, the four wives of Imam'S left his house forever. I took a bus heading west toward Jakarta. My plan was simple: disappear into the crowd of the capital city, where the Imam's influence would be weaker. The bus ride was long, nearly 9 hours, but with every mile, I felt the chains of that household loosening. I clutched my Bible under my veil, whispering prayers that felt strange yet comforting, prayers not from memory but from the heart. In Jakarta, I found a small room for rent. It was noisy, crowded, filled with people from different places, drivers, students, shopkeepers. Nobody asked too many questions about who I was. That anonymity became my shield. I taught language classes part-time, using my education to earn a little money. Slowly, I built a life, fragile but free. Though I was far, I never lost contact with the other wives. We found ways to send messages through people we trusted. Sometimes a market seller, sometimes a cousin who could be discreet. Each message carried both relief and sorrow. Amina had gone north, to Semarang, where one of her brothers still lived. Though he was surprised to see her after so many years, he sheltered her. She wrote to me, saying her dreams of Jesus had grown stronger and clearer. "He lets me know I am not abandoned," she said in one message. Layla had moved quietly to Surabaya, taking shelter with a distant aunt. She carried constant grief for Safa, her little girl, who she had been forced to leave behind. In her messages, she always asked me to pray for her daughter's protection. Miriam, the youngest, had gone south into small villages near Solo. She wrote that she sometimes felt lost and afraid, but she also felt lighter than she ever had before. "I breathe now without fear," she once told me through a trusted friend. The four of us were scattered like seeds across Indonesia, yet bound together by our shared escape and our hidden search for truth. We had walked away from the same house, from the same imam, from the same life. Now we were walking into unknown futures, but in our hearts, something new was stirring, a freedom that none of us had fully known before. For me, it was in those quiet evenings in Jakarta, when I would light a small lamp in my room and open my Bible, that I felt closest to God. He revealed to me that my steps were not accidents, that He was guiding me even when I could not see the road clearly. And in those moments, peace returned like a gentle river flowing through my soul. Every evening, when I returned from teaching my small language classes, I would sit alone in my rented room and open my Bible. The words felt alive. They spoke to my questions, answered my doubts, and gave me comfort. Whenever my mind went back to Yogyakarta, to the house I had left, to the children I had said goodbye to, I would feel a heavy pain. But then, as I read, peace would wash over me, and I knew that I was not forgotten. One Sunday morning, I gathered the courage to step into a church in Jakarta. It was a small fellowship tucked inside a narrow street near Tanah Abang. I stood at the doorway at first, afraid someone would recognize me. But when I finally entered, the people welcomed me with smiles, calling me sister. They did not ask too many questions about my past. They simply prayed for me. That day, for the first time, I felt what it meant to be part of a family that was not bound by force or tradition but by love. The pastor spoke about forgiveness, about God's mercy that reaches even to those who feel lost. His words touched me deeply. He said God calls each of us by name, and in that moment, I felt as though He was speaking directly to me. From then on, I attended the fellowship quietly. I did not reveal much about my past, but I joined in their prayers, sang their songs softly, and listened carefully to their teachings. Slowly, my heart grew stronger. I also shared small updates with the other wives whenever possible. In one message, I told Amina, "I found people who follow Jesus in truth. When they pray, I feel peace." She replied that her dreams of Jesus were becoming clearer, as though He was showing her that her journey was not finished. Layla still carried heavy grief for her daughter, but I encouraged her that God was able to protect Safa even when she was not there. Miriam, though young and sometimes frightened, wrote that she also longed to find people who followed the way of Jesus. I realized then that our escape had not just been from the walls of Imam'S house. It was an escape toward truth. Each of us, in different places, was being drawn slowly toward the same light. Months passed after our escape, and though we lived in different cities, we never lost touch. It was as though an unseen thread connected our hearts. Whenever one of us managed to send a message, it lifted the spirits of the others. Amina, living with her brother in Semarang, shared that her dreams of Jesus had not stopped. In fact, they were becoming more vivid. She wrote to me, "He lets me know that my journey is not in vain. I see light when everything around me feels dark." Her words gave us courage, because we knew she had lived the longest under the Imam's authority, and yet she now carried a hope stronger than before. Layla, in Surabaya, was still grieving for little Safa. Every time she wrote, her words were heavy with a mother's sorrow. "My daughter is still so young, yet I fear they may give her away," she confessed. But even in her pain, she added, "I trust that God will not close His eyes to the tears of a child." We prayed silently for Safa, each of us carrying her name in our hearts. Miriam, the youngest, wrote from her hiding place near Solo. "I feel free for the first time," she said. "Even though I have nothing, I no longer wake up in fear of footsteps outside my door." She admitted that she sometimes cried for her children, but she also confessed that she now whispered prayers she had never prayed before, asking God to show her the way. As for me, in Jakarta, I began to see God opening doors. The small fellowship I joined welcomed me more deeply, and I started to learn the teachings of Jesus with clarity. He revealed to me that my worth was not tied to how well I obeyed a man or followed traditions, but to his love for me. Each time I prayed, I felt strength to continue. It has now been years since that morning when the four of us walked out of Imam'S compound with tears on our faces. Looking back, I see that it was not just an escape. It was the beginning of a new journey that God Himself had written for us. Today, I live outside Indonesia. I will not write the exact location for safety, but I am free. Free to pray, free to worship, free to study the scriptures without fear. In my new community, I have found believers who love one another like family. They accepted me not as the fourth wife of an imam, but as a sister in Christ. Here, I have continued to grow in understanding. God revealed to me that His love is greater than the rules I once lived under, and His mercy is stronger than the condemnation I feared. As I reflect, I see clearly that our story is not just about leaving a man's house. It is about God calling us out of darkness into light. It is about finding peace where there was fear and love where there was control. And so, I want to speak to my Christian sisters, especially those who are young and unmarried. Please, do not ignore the Word of God when it warns you about who to join your life with. Do not be swayed by gifts, sweet promises, or outward appearances. Marriage is not just about today, it is about the future of your soul. If I had listened to the whisper of God earlier, I would have been spared much pain. I also want to encourage all believers. Hold on to your faith. Even in the darkest night, God never forgets His children. He let me know that He sees every tear, He hears every cry, and He is able to lead us into freedom when the time is right.